Next, may I invite Mr. Malcolm Davies, Director of International Business from MMRD Research Services, for building brand in Myanmar's changing environment.
Mingalava. Actually, after Minzo's wonderful case study presentation, I'm not sure that really I have much new material here, since he seems to have answered all the points that I'd like to raise. It is good that I actually remember being here in the 90s when Mandalay beer was the dominant beer in the market, and I remember the launch of Myanmar beer, and so you've done a fantastic job. And the first chart I wanted to put up here, just at the start, and the only chart I really want to talk about brand specifically, the brand philosophy, which I think is perfectly encapsulated by MBL, is that a brand is a living business idea, but a consumer is also a living, evolving entity in a changing environment, and especially so in the Myanmar environment at the moment. So brands and consumers must evolve with the consumer and the market to prosper and survive. And I think the MBL case is a perfect example of where that attempt is being made. And they have to do that because they know that there's a lot of new market entrants, particularly the Thai brands coming into the market nowadays at much cheaper rates due to some wonderful, interesting tax avoidance programs. But just who am I quickly? The reason I'm talking about this is because I want to give some examples and comparisons to Thailand. But basically, I've been in this business, marketing, research, advertising and strategic planning for about 28 years. 20 years based in Asia, primarily focused on Southeast Asia, Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, Singapore and Indonesia. I first visited Myanmar 20 years ago in 1993, and have been working with the MMRD team since 1994, primarily at that stage under the hat of Nielsen Thailand. And I also have extensive experience working throughout Southeast Asia with leading advertising organisations. So just to get that out at the outset, because I want to use some comparisons about what I saw with the development of Thailand from 20 years ago, which I think is very pertinent to where the Myanmar market is going now. So essentially in terms of how will the Myanmar market environment change for your brand and company, I think it's going to change in such extensive ways. So what I've tried to focus on a little bit here is sort of facing the future, how to prepare your company and brand for increased and foreign competition. I'm not saying just increased foreign competition, but I think there'll be a lot of development of local brands and increased competition amongst those local brands. And as I said, what can we learn from our neighbours' experience, and Thailand in particular? But it's a positive story. So the theme of today's presentation is still really much on a growth and opportunity story. There'll be some pitfalls in the process. That's only natural with a rapidly developing market, but it's still a very positive story. So to start with, let's reflect a bit. And where is Myanmar now? So you will mostly be familiar with the issues that I'm going to raise here, but obviously the political situation has stabilised after decades of isolation. And as all the international press is saying, the last frontier in Asia, has finally opened up. I must admit, when I was here in the 1990s, as a lot of you obviously were as well, we thought that things were going to open up there, only for the sanctions to come in 97 and things to sort of be curtailed for another 10 years. So we now know that major reforms have been undertaken, the ratification of the foreign investment law, tariff reductions, etc. And there's big milestones on the horizon which are very important for the government, very important for the PR of the nation as a whole, such as the Southeast Asian Games this year, Chair of ASEAN, and the AEC and ASEAN Economic Community and AFTA free trade areas. So the focus now is definitely on economic development, and obviously this has a substantial flow-on effect to brands and companies within the market. Try not to give you too many statistics, and I've tried to highlight the ones that we're looking at, but sometimes there's a bit of a feeling that this growth has only really started in the last year. But it's actually for the last couple of years, although coming off an extremely low base, that the GDP of Myanmar has been growing quite substantially. The arrival last year in particular, or the high-profile arrival of the international FMCG giants, and we got a lot of press about the start of the Cola Wars. All the big FMCG companies, the Unilever, P&Gs, Colgates, Nivea, the whole range across all categories are starting to really increase their activity. So, as I've put here, it's all really starting to happen now, and it's about how we, as marketers, as researchers, as service agencies in that market, adapt to that change and provide the best advice to our clients, local and international. And this is, you know, even from September last year, you can already see the outdoor bunting for Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Although travelling up north in the country just recently, I think they need to do a better job. Their visibility is still pretty low. So I'm going to show you a series of charts now on the beverage category, and these are really just to show you the growth in the market. Now, carbonated soft drinks, beers, these sort of products are discretionary FMCG products and tend to indicate that people are feeling happy and more confident in their personal situation. So in a way, it's an early guidance point. It's a happiness index on what's happening in the market. And you can see over the last 4 years here that carbonated soft drinks incidence has been increasing. And even from 2010 to 2012, the increase has been 11%. And that's before we even start looking at the impact of the new players and the reduction, the substantial reduction in price point for the SKUs in the marketplace. Cold drink incidents across the board, non-carbonated soft drink, energy drinks, bottled water, all showing substantial increase. Hot drink incidence is also increasing, coffee mix, tea mix, lemon tea, cereal mix. And importantly, from my perspective and probably from MBL's perspective, beer drinking incidence is also on the rise, which is important. But there's a couple of charts I'll show you about beer drinking incidence, which show that it's not just an urban and young person level of positiveness in the economy. We can see here, looking at beer drinking incidence across age groups, we can see across all age groups there's been substantial increase in beer drinking incidence across all age groups, and particularly, which I think is interesting, is in the older age group, because typically in the older age group there's less likely to be an increase in consumption in beer, more likely to be a focus on spirits. And this is also incredibly interesting to show that the level of confidence and the level of growth within the society is spread across all areas, not just in metro and urban, but also in rural. And when we initially saw this result, we were quite surprised by it. But with some further investigation into the market, we're understanding that, you know, consumers are starting to get a little bit more money in their pocket, not a substantial amount, but they're starting to trade off for the traditional BE white spirits into the more glamorous beer product categories. This chart here, I'm not sure how clear it is to see here. Basically, it's a satellite photograph of Myanmar, Thailand, India, and Yunnan province in southern China, and it was developed by IDP Jetro. And they use it as an alternative way to estimate economic activities in developing countries. So where you see the bright lights, that actually corresponds to cities. And they're saying the brighter the lights are in countries, the greater the economic performance within that country. So you can see the bright lights down to the bottom in the right there. That's Bangkok and the eastern seaboard, where we know there's a lot of industrial development. Top right is all Yunnan province in southern China, and across to the northwest is India. Now, if we look in the middle where Myanmar is, if we look really carefully, and I'm not sure how well you can see it on this particular chart, but it's very small. Here we can see a little light for Yangon, maybe one for Naypyidaw, but they've probably got some newer lights and a lot of bright shining stars in the political capital. And Mandalay is also a little dot on the map. It's just an indication, while things are moving, we are still a long way behind our neighbours. So the section here I've put is, okay, where is Myanmar going? You know, we know it's going forward, and I think there's quite a lot of learning that we can get from our neighbours, and particularly Thailand in particular, and that's probably, from my perspective, because I've been in the market for 20 years in Thailand, I've seen a level of development which I think is starting to replicate within this market. So basically, where were they 25 years ago and where are they now? And I think as a country in transition, Myanmar can learn lessons of economic growth and development from its neighbours, particularly Thailand, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam and Cambodia, which all grew 6 to 10% annually during their high growth periods. Poverty was reduced by as much as half in a decade, and Myanmar, based on all the International Monetary Fund predictions, are suggesting that their growth is likely to be at 6 to 8% per year for a decade or more, which would raise their per capita income from something like $700 now up to $2,000 to $3,000 by 2030. This chart is also pretty interesting from the IMF, and it's saying with an annual growth rate of 7.7% of GDP per capita, Myanmar's income level will reach that of present day, well, Thailand in 2010 in 25 years. So I think there's a lot to learn out of following the Thai example, and I'm making the assumption here we all have a very good understanding of the Thai market. I've pulled out some figures from Thailand in the 1990s and Myanmar in the last couple of years, just to show some comparisons. And I'm basically looking at Thailand in the early 90s, reflecting Myanmar in around about 2011 and 12. And these, the two bar charts I've got here, is the blue line corresponds to inflation. And you can see in both markets there was a drop and management of inflation, while GDP growth has started to increase. So in 1992, we're looking at 7.6 in Thailand and 4% in growth, whereas in Myanmar now we're looking at 6 to 7% growth versus about 4% inflation. Employment is also in transition, and it will change dramatically from the rural and primary industries into urban services and industry. And this will definitely mirror the change in Thailand from 20 plus years ago. And we need to be prepared as brand owners and companies for this change, because it means that consumers are going to have more disposable income. And so what I've put here, and maybe it's a little premature, or maybe it is particularly accurate for some areas, but we're starting to see now what we would call the birth of the modern consumer in Myanmar. The share of GDP by sector and region is also showing very similar parallels to the experience in Thailand from 1965 through 1990. The structural transformation beyond the agricultural sector into industry and services has begun and is the sign of a successfully developing country. But I put here as a caveat, it's still very early days in this process. And we can look here at some of the projections for share of GDP by sector for Myanmar. If we're looking at, say, 2010 to 2030, we're looking at the contribution from the agriculture and primary sector to GDP will reduce by nearly half, whereas industry will nearly double in that period, and service sector will also grow substantially stronger. The same patterns occurred over a longer period of time, but in Thailand, where you saw agriculture drop from a third of the economy to around about 10% of the economy, industry from 22 up to 40%. The population growth rate in Myanmar is following the same pattern as occurred in Thailand during its development. Myanmar's current population growth is about the same as was in Thailand in the 1990s. And the two figures that I've highlighted here is 1990s for the bottom chart, 1990s for Thailand at 1.4 population growth rate. We're at about 1.47, give or take a few points there. Population by age group, there's still a gender imbalance with more females than males. The population is still young, with 34% under 17, 46 under 24 years of age. So essentially, future consumers and the workforce are what I've called ripening at the right moment in time for Myanmar's economic development. And it's these people we need to understand, and we need to develop with them their needs and aspirations so that we can target our brands and arrange our companies to be facing the needs of these organisations. Dependency ratios is also an interesting area. We know that as markets develop and populations grow, they tend to follow the same patterns in developing countries. There will be a decrease in the number of young people and young births, and what we're seeing from our statistics at the moment is, particularly under the ages of about 7, there has been a bit of a decline in birth rate, and we know there will be an increase in the elderly as the economy and health care and nutrition improves. And these are all factors on how you might launch your product, how you might position your product, but understanding the progress that is likely to happen within the market. Household size and number, remarkably similar for Myanmar in matches Thailand for 1990. Increasing household numbers, but decreasing household size. The population, and I know we've tossed this figure around a little bit today, but let's say we're about 56 million in Myanmar in 2012, and a similar figure in Thailand in 1990. And this all fits with the strong cultural and religious similarities to the market and structure of the market. What I've also looked at here is just in a bit more detail. The numbers highlighted in red for Myanmar, a population, let's say, of 56 million, average household size at about 4.5, number of households 11.1, and then you look back to 1990 for Thailand, 56, 4.6 and 12.2 respectively. So there is a lot of parallels here. Household income and expenditure. Okay, we know it's still very low nationwide. Household expenditure, from our assessments, is approximately 2/3 of household income, and particularly when you get up into upcountry and rural areas, we know that this means that the level of disposable income that consumers have is very small. It's very much hand-to-mouth living. Yangon, Mandalay obviously have the highest levels of income within the country. And household durable ownership, which was highlighted by the MSR team earlier this morning, while it's still low levels, are starting to turn. We're starting to see growth in these areas, and it's likely to follow the same pattern as Thailand. Because believe it or not, Thailand in the early 90s had car penetration of only about 20% nationwide. Now, if you go to Thailand and you've been in the traffic in Bangkok, you know that figure can't possibly be true. The retail revolution is also about to begin. In the next 10 years, what we're going to see is massive growth in modern and traditional trade, especially in supermarkets and convenience stores. There'll be the introduction of international retailers, brands, modern retailing techniques, technology, scan data, credit cards. The financial system is still at an incredibly nascent stage. There'll be more secure banking. ATMs, which we're now starting to see, will revolutionise the marketing landscape. Daily shopping will still be very popular at mum and pop shops, particularly up country, but they will gradually give way to the more weekly shopping experience at major suburban shopping complexes in the large urban centres. Retailers will grow rapidly in tandem with international manufacturers and suppliers and brands, but to get that space on the retail shelf will become more and more competitive. And obviously there'll be improved distributions, which are all going to be linked into the development of improved infrastructure. Just to quickly show you now, I mean, we're already seeing here we've got a picture of a traditional convenience store at the top, and a picture of a modern convenience store at the bottom. So it's already starting to happen in the marketplace. And of course, we know about the modern supermarkets, particularly City Marketplace, that are already starting to open up within Yangon in particular, which reflects a similar quality to what you get in any other developed market within Southeast Asia. Without stealing too much of Lin Lin's data, which she will present on advertising later, this is just a quick indication of the advertising expenditure. It's just to show that the growth, particularly over the last years, has increased substantially. And you've got to think back a little bit, because up until 2005, 2006, there was only about 2 television stations in the whole country, the highly watched government and military stations. So we know now, with all the satellite television stations and all the options, that there is going to be more space for international companies to advertise their brands. I've put this chart up here, and it might take a little bit of understanding, but essentially the premise is here that market research spend as a percentage of ad spend is roughly about 4 to 5%. So in the third line there, market research ad spend, within Myanmar we've got about 4.3%. In Thailand it's about 4.5%. The big difference is, if we go to the top of the chart and we look at the difference in GDP, we know that GDP in Myanmar is around about 55 billion at the moment, and actually Thailand's probably closer to 390 billion now. The ad spend in each of those markets is, we've got a factor of, I think that's around about 6 times less, and our market research spend is substantially less than that again. Now, if we look at the figures that I've highlighted at the bottom, the market research spend to GDP within Myanmar is at 0.007%, and whereas in Thailand it's at 0.04%. The ad spend to GDP within this market is at 0.14%, whereas in Thailand it's at 0.92%. So we know that by a factor of approximately 6 or 7, our advertising expenditure and consequently our market research expenditure in this market is below the proportion of GDP. Now, we know that with all the companies coming into the market and wanting to advertise their products, that the advertising spend is going to go up. The advertising spend will go up because more people are wanting to buy product. If advertising spend goes up, obviously market research spend goes up, and consumers will in the end have greater disposable income to purchase product, because clients don't advertise if they're not getting any success, and that's why they employ market research agencies to measure that. So what happens when markets open? How do we prepare ourselves? Well, closed market economies tend to have products that are not up to international standards, due primarily to the low availability of technology, certain raw materials, expertise, lack of branding sophistication, lack of distribution techniques. So when markets open, they are often flooded with high-quality international products. Local consumers, initially, when they can afford it, will prefer new international products to the old-fashioned products that they're used to buying. And part of the psyche of the Myanmar consumer at the moment is Myanmar wants to be part of the world. So they want to have an experience that encompasses what the international marketplace is offering. But this won't last forever. There'll be initial fad to a flock to buy new international products, and I think I'm not sure if it was Mojo earlier in one of his presentations talking about people lining up to buy, the Samsung product, which is fairly uncalled or unexpected within this market. But you see it in Thailand when a new Dunkin' Donuts store opens. All of a sudden you had 2-hour queues as people were trying to get into new products. But then, as the market develops a little bit further, there's a reaction against these international products and a return to local. And that's as the consumers become probably a little bit, the balance between their emotional decision-making and their rational decision-making starts to level out a little bit. And they're saying, why spend so much? If it was good enough for my parents, it's good enough for me. So they're starting to balance a value proposition. Then they realise that actually some of these international products are maybe better than the local, so there's a return to a middle ground, and they say, I will buy some international products only if they're offering good value for money. Classic definition of markets by the academics and economists of the world tend to follow roughly, four broad categories. Is what we call frontier markets, developing markets, emerging markets, and developed markets. Now, the question I would ask you is, how would you classify the Thai market under those rules? Would you say it's a frontier market? Probably not. And who would think it's a developing market? If you could put a show of hands, who would think that Thailand's a developing market? Anyone think it's a developing market? What about an emerging market? Okay. And any people think it's a developed market? Okay, no hands on developed market. Well, actually, you could argue that Thailand is probably all four. Bangkok is a modern city, as modern as any other city in the world. It has good transportation systems, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but it has good transportation systems except for cars, for when you get stuck in the traffic. But it has all the modern facilities, modern retail trade, great media outlets, restaurants, shopping complexes, sky trains, subways. It's a very modern city. But the further you go to the northeast in the country, the level and standard of living decreases gradually. Decreases gradually. So as you get further away, it becomes more of an emerging market, then a developing market, and as you get out towards the Lao border into the rural areas, it's really a frontier market. And the reason I'm putting that up here is that Myanmar will follow the same trend here and develop at an uneven pace. We're already seeing that now. Consumers in Yangon will demand higher quality products, while consumers upcountry will not be able to afford them. Now, part of our challenge as marketers is to work out how to capture a nationwide market. And we know that we can't use the one-size-fits-all product. Even the telecommunication handset makers, and I did a lot of work with Nokia in the region, and they've got a whole range of different phones that they use for different levels within the marketplace. And we know that the shampoo brands work and a lot of the FMCG brands look at creating sachets and smaller units to be able to sell in the upcountry areas. So most multinationals and local companies will follow a two-tier pricing and product strategy. They'll have international products at higher prices for socioeconomic ABC, while they'll have lower quality, lower price products within their portfolio for the lower C, D and E classes. And we know that even the beer brands such as MBL have different price products to capture different parts of the market. So as these markets are flooded with high-quality international products, local consumers are going to prefer new international products initially. Prices will soar and expectations will rise. And this will put pressure on a lot of local manufacturers to improve their game. At the moment, most multinational companies are checking out the market. They're doing research, they're feeling out the market, but they still haven't jumped in a wholehearted way yet, because they're still afraid might be too strong a word, but they're still trying to make an assessment, an understanding of the lay of the land. That's why initially they're coming to the market research companies and saying, okay, tell us about the consumers across your country. What information do you have? Then they're trying to find the right partner, and the right partner could be a marketing services partner, advertising agency, market research agency, also a distribution partner, or possibly a joint venture partner. And they need to also working hard to understand the legal system and understand and interpret our somewhat fluid and changing investment laws. So, as companies, I guess this is a bit of a harsh chart, but we will be faced with major decisions. You know, do we sell? Do we immediately sell out to foreign companies and say, okay, we can't compete, they're too big, they're too strong? Or do we stand up and fight in a David and Goliath type battle and hit them head on, which is not likely to prove successful over a long period of time? Or do we close down? Now, I think closing down is not an option at all, but I think it's how we start. We need to think smartly about how we approach this, and that's across all local and even for the international companies coming into the market. But in order for us to be able to survive and not close down, we must get stronger to survive. So, what should a local company do? Well, what the multinational companies do lack, and this is our strength, is local knowledge, and especially of the consumer, especially of the distribution and sales network, of factories, of legal, government relations and laws that cover setup and management of factories. And in capital letters we've got here, good local people. Because at the end of the day, they can try and international companies can come in and try and transport and transplant systems that have worked in other markets, but without local expertise and local knowledge, they are going to maybe not fail, but they will definitely slow their approach and success within the market. So, how do we prepare for the future? And I'm sorry that this image is probably a little bit dramatic, but we need to develop a deep understanding of your customer. Now, this might seem fairly basic, but I think when we're in a rapidly changing market like this, this is just not a one-off read and say, okay, we did one study, we understand our customer, therefore they like this particular style of communication, that's what we're going to go with. It's a constantly evolving process. And as in Thailand, the amount of work we would do on FMCG clients and how quickly we would update communication strategies to communicate with our key target market is astounding, because of the economic growth in this market. If it's going to range at 7 to 8% for the next 20 years, people will change rapidly. So we need to understand the needs and problems and develop products that they want. We also need to get stronger. I mean, we can't just sit on our laurels and sit back and say, okay, yes, we know the local market better. Therefore, you know, if you don't use us, you don't know what you're talking about. We need to, what we've put here, upgrade your factory, and that means upgrade your factory, upgrade your office, upgrade your brands, upgrade your company processes, and everything from creating international standards within the workplace, and obviously things that are sensitive to any international companies that, particularly on the human rights area, we need to also address. Pretty important here, how to get stronger. What I've seen in Thailand is that when big companies come in, they can pay 2 and 3 times the price to prize away your good local staff. So you need to lock in your key employees. Give them a share of the business, probably a substantial share would do me, Peter, if that's okay with you. And but quite seriously, it's important that you want to incentivise your key employees, and so that they've got buy-in and a personal investment in your organisation. And this will help with long-term contracts. And sometimes we need to get high-quality employees, possibly from outside the market, preferably with those that have got some experience specific experience within the category, and preferably if they've got experience in the Asian markets. This one here is probably a pretty interesting one, and I'm not sure if that's 2 or 3 sets of different books he's got here. But make sure your finances are in order and proper and transparent accounts. Because if you do go down the road of having a relationship with an international supplier, they're going to be concerned if we're running 2 and 3 sets of books and our financial processes are all a bit askew. And here get a war chest, secure your financing, and make sure you have the money. This is not just if you're looking at going into a battle with anyone, but if you're going to be looking at marketing and promoting your brands and developing your brands in this market, it's going to be rapid innovation over a consistent period of time, and you've got to be looking at a long-term horizon of 10 years plus, and you need to stockpile your money to improve your business and your brands. So finally, can you read that? Yeah. You need to improve your product offering and improve your company standards. And I know this was touched on a little bit earlier at the start, but the shift from products to customers is the most critical one that every company must make. The organisation must think of itself not as producing goods or services, but as buying customers, doing things that make people want to do business with them.